Welcome to See Social Differently, a podcast brought to you by Sprout Social, where we talk about one of our favorite topics, seeing social differently. I'm Alicia Daitner, and today I'm talking with two members of Sprout Social's product team, Anjali Turkar and Kevin Bertram. Both of their roles involve understanding what our customers need with the shared goal of improving Sprout's product. Though you both work on Sprout's product team, your roles are pretty different. So, Anjali and Kevin, I'd love to start today's podcast by having you each share more about your role and your individual work, but also a little bit about how your roles work together. So, Anjali, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a lead product manager here at Sprout. I've been here for about 6 years and I've been on a bunch of different teams, but my core responsibility is really taking actionable insights, whether from the broader market and industry, from our customers, from our business and partners, and translating that into change we can take to make an impact on problems that people are having. What that looks like in practice is I might select maybe 3 to 5 problems that need to be solved in a given quarter. And then I work with a team of designers and engineers to build solutions and features that will solve those problems. But it all starts with having really rich insight into the problems that we want to solve. And that's sometimes where Kevin comes in.
Yeah, thanks for the setup. Yeah, definitely. I'm a user researcher at Sprout. So yeah, my job is just to talk to customers as often as possible. And like Anjali said, I take the learnings and insights from those conversations and I give it to people like her so that they can make better decisions.
So our listeners here today, this is like pure behind the scenes intel into how we build things better. And I love that the two of you sort of have different layers in that process. And the ultimate goal is just to continue to improve Sprout so that our customers have a product that works for them. When we were getting to know each other a little bit before, you both shared how this partnership didn't really happen overnight. In fact, you were both doing a little bit different types of work before it became clear that your roles had this great intersection for how things could come together. So, Kevin, explain to me a little bit about how Sprout built out research and your role as part of that process.
A lot of teams, and mine included, started doing things like watching recording sessions of the app to better understand how the experience was changing and how people were actually doing things, which was actually pretty far away from the team's normal day-to-day before that moment in time.
Yeah.
And so it kind of changed a lot of perspectives within a team, right? Like designers traditionally have had pretty good insight into how people are doing things, but sometimes the people actually building the product can feel a little bit separate from that. So like this exposure to how people are actually using the things that you build can kind of change perspective across a team in a really positive way.
What was one of the most interesting things about that process? Not so much about what you found, but just like, where did you start? How did you know that it was time to start doing more research?
Initially, we kind of just started with talking with people internally that already use our product. So we really just started with them because it was, they were literally down the hallway. We could just ask them questions. And then it kind of ballooned into how can we, like, what recommendations might they have of customers that we should talk to from their interactions with customers. And it kind of just grew from there, but it was never any one person's responsibility. It was just that we were all hungry to get some of that customer insight. And it took us kind of just organically growing it as a practice and just kind of informally reaching out to customers to start.
When you're thinking about research, you started with our social team. They know our product, they use it every day. But there's also something that I've heard about called empathy hours. Can you both share a little bit more about what empathy hours are?
It's getting everybody on the team into a room together and doing various exercises and things that help you develop empathy for the people that you're building your product for. And it can involve doing what I was mentioning earlier, which is watching session recordings, but it can also be like literally having someone like come in and talk to your team about how they do their work. There are other things that we sometimes do, which again, sort of jokingly, I call LARPing, LARPing, live action role playing. It's not like casting magic spells or anything. It's like getting scenarios set up for people to have firsthand experience of the product that they're building. For example, I worked on a team that builds the Smart Inbox. So we had an exercise where we broke up people by discipline. So you have like back-end platform devs, front-end devs, QA engineers on separate teams trying to be social media managers managing their inboxes. And so we had teams of people like doing fake tweets at these people and trying to feel sort of the stress that can come with that job, which you don't feel as a person developing for that. But afterward, talking to people, their perspective around their job changed in terms of what sort of things they need to build and prioritize that help reduce stress and things like that. It just helps you make better decisions as a product team when you've had that firsthand experience of what it's like to do the job that you're designing for.
Yeah. I love this. And honestly, an empathy party just sounds like a really nice place to be. It sounds very, very kind and reassuring.
Yeah.
But yeah, that this idea of not only starting with the customer, which is something that I know at Sprout, like we think of that in all of our work is we start with the customer and what will benefit them, but then putting ourselves, our people into that position of the customer and sort of reverse engineering what they might want by having somebody who, is going to run into those scenarios or run into those snags in a very organic way. So I just think that that's a good practice for any discipline, but especially when you're trying to get really technical insights. So I'm a fan of this approach.
I totally agree. And for what it's worth, I think one of the hardest parts about research is you don't always have the insights that you need in the exact moment that you need it when you're trying to make a decision. And so an empathy party is a great way to kind of build that consciousness and that sort of understanding of a customer so that you don't necessarily need to have the exact data point in the moment. You just understand the customer more broadly and can make a good decision in the moment.
So Anjali, I'm picturing you having this like giant whiteboard of like potential improvements and potential ideas, and you're just sort of waiting for the right time when need and resources and everything aligns. Is that what your office looks like? Be honest.
Yeah, the stars, the moon as well have to align the the market, especially in social media. I mean, things change constantly, daily. Like a partner will launch a new feature, and we think it's expressly important that our customers get that feature in their hands as soon as possible, as soon as it's available from one of our partners. And so it is a constant, not just juggling, but rejuggling and reshuffling and making sure that we seize the right opportunity at the right time. It's a really fun jigsaw puzzle to just sort of consistently be solving and resolving.
But I imagine it creates tension too, because again, if we're saying that we want to hear from our customers and what they want, it might feel not so good if a customer tells you that and then they never see their feedback implemented. But it sounds like they can rest assured that it does make it onto your whiteboard, even if we're still not ready to like make those improvements or we're working on them. But it's more than a 2-week sprint's worth of work to implement it.
Absolutely. And I think there are some situations in which we collect every piece of feedback that we get. We actually track every single piece that we get, whether it's during a call with our customer success team, whether it's a chat through our support team, whether it's through an onboarding survey. We track everything and we sort of tag it into certain problem areas or solutions that we might be able to solve for. And ultimately, what we also need to do is take a step back and look at all that feedback holistically. We're really lucky that we have a customer base that is so diverse and so varied. It's one of the things that I actually love the most about my job is the fact that our solution appeals to any brand now. Like any organization needs a tool to manage their social presence. But that also means that we have to be very mindful of whether a feature that we're building is going to work for an agency customer. And will it also work for a university, for a hospital, for a nonprofit, for a government agency, for a politician, for a large corporation? Like there's just so many use cases And we want to make sure that as we introduce solutions, that they are either broadly applicable, or if they cater to a specific use case, that they don't necessarily introduce a problem for another type of customer. So it really takes a lot of discernment to take that feedback in, but then really synthesize it and suss out what is the right solution to that problem.
Yeah, that's such a good perspective of what, a solution for you, does it create friction for someone else? And our customers, all of them, aren't getting in a room and talking it out and saying, well, if you need this, I'm okay with this. So that's really where your role comes in. And I think that's such a very cool, like you're this like nucleus of all of this feedback, and you have to make decisions and yeah, plan out strategies for compiling all of that. And just really impressive to me, all of those points of collection that you mentioned. And we all know that not only do we get that intel from those points of collection, but that people will, if people have a point that they want to communicate, they will post it, they will tweet it, they will send it into the world in every forum that they can. And so it's just a lot of information to gather.
Social is a focus group. Like, it is a public forum in which folks can share their opinion. And I think in a lot of ways, there are times when our social media managers will ask a community question, and we'll follow up with interesting questions so that we can learn a little bit more. And I love following those threads because you just learn so much about how social media managers think about their jobs and what tools are important to them, how they're navigating certain challenges. And it's just helpful. It's helpful learning that is publicly available and costs nothing to do.
When we were talking a little bit earlier, I was thinking about how one of the biggest challenges is access. People listening to this might be thinking, like, how do I reach these people? It may be a hairier question than it seems, but social is that space that everyone has access to.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, your brand is on social. So that is the place that you can start for sure.
Kevin, that is an excellent point. You can really start with social in your research. And Anjali, to your point too, that social is the forum for feedback. So if you two are going to give a piece of advice to our listeners and leaders who maybe haven't thought about approaching research in a really strategic or in a methodical way, like what's one piece of advice that you would give them to get started with research? And is it using social? Is it using something else? I would just love your thoughts on where to start.
Social is a great place to start. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like when we talk about gaining insights, like Anjali was describing a process that has taken years to form, right? Like there's all those various forms of input require a lot of setup and services and processes behind them. But social is there already. It's at your fingertips. You're already doing it. You're already using it. You've probably have already gained insights from social.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being a little bit purposeful about it, I think. And so getting started is literally just like listening to the conversation that your audience is having. And I think the key becomes then is starting to form hypotheses, ideas that you have about the way people think or feel about your product or your brand, using the things that you're seeing on social to then test them as you go forward in the future to help shape your understanding.
To your point, Anjali's summation of this like multi-year, multi-layered work is just an indicator of why you are in the right role to be approaching all of this information and distilling it. So yeah, like even your ability to summarize it for us today, it sounds so straightforward and simple, but it's very, very complex. So I don't want that to get lost, that everyone can be, up and running 10 easy steps to your fully developed research and implementation process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, as Kevin said, it doesn't have to take a ton of time, and it also doesn't have to be expensive. It can be, as we said, there's sort of in the product world, we call it hallway feedback, like hallway usability feedback, where you can literally just ask anyone really for feedback on your product. And of course, like you want to eventually get richer and richer insights and maybe more targeted, but starting with any piece of feedback is helpful. And I think one thing that we have stumbled into in the past that I think we've gotten better at is there's also different types of feedback. And one of our chief people officer often says feedback is a gift. And we've done these trainings actually on the difference between a heart and a diamond in terms of feedback. And there's sort of the heart is where it's like, I love your product. It's so amazing. It's so cool. Keep going. It's awesome. Great feedback, but I don't really know what we're doing right. Like, I don't know what we're doing to earn that heart versus diamond feedback, which is very specific and concrete and actionable. And you can actually do something with it and you know what you can repeat. So a good example of that would be, I love your product. It saves me time by delivering groceries to my door. Then I know that it's the convenience of delivery. That's the thing that people really like. So that's the thing that we should make sure that we continue to do and that we even maybe refine and hone. And I think it's the same thing with negative feedback. If someone says your product is terrible, I can't even use it. Well, that's helpful, but it's not quite specific enough. And so how can you ask questions to kind of get a little bit more specific than just this is good or this is bad? And then I think in terms of actually choosing ideas, it can also sometimes be really hard to just, if you get tons of feedback or if you get a lot of feedback from one very loud person that, we always have that one person, especially on social media, who is very, very vocal, it can be hard to choose the thing that is the right thing to do. And I think to Kevin's point, experimenting with something and choosing an experiment that will give you a learning the fastest. One thing I love about what social media marketers do is you can learn so quickly from one post to see how it performed. And I think that lesson applies to a lot of things. What will give you the fastest guidance, the fastest feedback? And if you choose that idea, whether or not you know it's a good idea or not, if you at least know that it'll teach you something, that's valuable on its own sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice because it's when you're trying to tackle this sort of like this very broad idea of improvement or growth. Those seem like such large and unwieldy topics to get a strategy wrapped around. So I love this idea of honing in, doing one thing, take one action to understand one piece of information and just start there. And that's the best way to get like this much more out of your complete process. We've talked a lot about how we use research and how we love research and the ways that we've come about it. But what would you say if a team or a business is not using research to inform their product or service offerings? What are they missing? Like, what is the danger zone that they enter by not using research and maybe just guessing or taking like a more narrow approach to their product or service?
To me, the hardest parts of my job are when I feel like I don't have enough information to make a decision. And doing research gives you more inputs, more levers to pull. It makes things easier because you feel more confident. And research, very simply, it offers you an opportunity to get reinvigorated. Like after a call with a customer, I feel like this renewed sense of interest in my work because I've just had like 30 minutes of intense conversation with someone telling me like intimately about their lives. And it just like gets me motivated because I'm like, oh, I can do this. I've learned something new. I'm excited to try to put the pieces together.
I totally agree. And I did want to say a big shout out to some of our customers that have gotten on calls with us and have let us ask really curious questions about their jobs and about how they do their work, and even sharing their screen sometimes and showing us how they use the smart of the content calendar. We ask these very difficult questions sometimes of what is the hardest part about your job, or what is the task you wish you would take you less time. And we get into some very vulnerable conversations, and social media is a really tough place to work sometimes. And we're really lucky that our customers give us such rich insight and are willing to take, even sometimes an hour out of their day just to teach us something about their lives and their jobs and how they use our tools. So big shout out to our customers for that.
Yes, we love it.
Yeah. I often think that the reason that I advocate for learning as quickly as possible is that it is really expensive to learn later and to sometimes learn too late. And you can kind of think of it with building anything, whether it's a campaign or if it's an airplane. Like if you find out too late that the 2-seater airplane actually has to have 8 seats, like that's an architectural decision that you've learned too late in the game. It is better, I think, to what Kevin was saying, to kind of be iterative along the way and get that feedback as soon as possible.
That's so valuable to start small, be scrappy if you have to, but just get something to get going. And we at Sprout build our product as a software platform, among other things that we're able to do with our customers. Like what we're building is a very specific thing, but I think these insights are really applicable to any brand or business, whether your product is airplanes, whether your product is consulting services, or even, Anjali, you mentioned earlier that like politicians, that is a fast paced industry. And the product is really, is a person and what they will bring to a role. And so you can't wait too long. And so I think your advice of just getting started can vary in application based on our listeners' products and services that they're building. And I think that's another great way to consider it. If you're not building software, this is still really useful information.
We're all trying to solve problems. And I think that this is kind of more of just, how do we solve problems? Like how do we solve problems for other people whose minds we can't read?
Yeah. And when we can't read them, how do we try? How do we ask? And to your point about customers that are so willing to trust us with their challenges and trust us to, build from those uses, I think is a really important part of the research process that we've built and that others can take away too, is that you have to build that trust with your users so that they will give you feedback that is actionable and helpful. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, I think it's applicable for a software platform, but also just really good life skills. And you two are definitely, I could talk about this all day. So I appreciate all of your insights. Thank you, Kevin and Anjali, so much for giving us a behind the scenes look at how we consider research and consider our customer feedback. This has been so meaningful. To our listeners, if you are trying to figure out where to start, take Kevin and Anjali's advice and start small. Be a little scrappy if you have to, and just look for one piece of information to keep you moving, because the more information that you can have, the easier your decisions will be. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, check out other episodes of the See Social Differently podcast, and we hope to hear from you again soon. Thanks, everyone.